Hey, what is up, guys? Today we are going to learn how to color grade in Premiere. So go ahead and pull up that application, get your footage ready, and get ready to make some magic. Cue the logo. Okay, welcome to the second part of learning the workflow of Premiere. First thing we're going to dive into is coloring. So up here across the top, Adobe's kind of got some different buttons, some different layouts of Premiere. They have a bunch of different tools, and Premiere is very vast. Most people only use a small percentage of Premiere. If I click the color, I've made adjustments to mine and actually changed the title to Color Pro. But anybody using, I think, CC 2017 and later will have just color up here. With Color Pro, I've added in Lumetri scopes. And then I've also added the effect controls for clips down here. So to start off with editing color, we need to understand a few things about effects and how effects are applied to our videos. So if you go over here to the effect controls, if you double click on a video and then you actually navigate over to effect controls, this is where you can make specific adjustments to video clips themselves. When your computer is, or when Premiere is applying effects to the video, it starts from the top of the list here and it works its way down. And it applies them to the video in order. So that's important to know because when we're coloring, we're going to do it in a couple of different steps. The first step we're going to take with coloring is getting the colors and everything balanced correctly in the clip itself. And then once we have all the colors balanced, at that point we will then add on some creative looks to kind of give this style to the video using LUTs. So to set up our editing for coloring correctly, the first thing we're going to do is go down to effects down here and search for Rgb curves. It's in obsolete because Premiere has added in some different ways to do this and believes that this is now obsolete. And I'm sure at some point they'll remove this because they are all powerful and believe they know that do things the right way. But we know that there's multiple ways to do everything and each person does things their own way. This is how I do things. This is how I color. So I'm going to grab Rgb curves. I'm going to throw it onto that clip. And as you can see up here in the effect controls, it then adds Rgb curves to the list. If I close down, this is where you can make the adjustments. If I close that down, it's now part of the list. And then later on, when I come over here to the Lumetri color and make adjustments here, it will add a Lumetri color to the list and it will put that underneath the Rgb curves. And again, that's on purpose because we want to have the Premiere make the adjustments that we make in Rgb curves first and then tag on what we do in Lumetri color afterwards. So the reason I have Lumetri scopes open here is because I want to have a visual representation of each pixel and the way that the shot or the clip is set up as far as its colors. As we know, RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and red, green, and blue are the colors that comprise each individual pixel of the picture. And so each pixel has a combination of red, green, and blue to give it its value and its color, so that which then all the pixels comprise our image and our shot. So with Lumetri scopes, we want to balance the whole image so that all of the colors are a lifelike and realistic representation of the shot. And so looking at the scopes here, we can see, let me just teach you that the higher end up here represents the highlights or the light areas of the image. The lower end down here represents the shadows and the dark areas. And so that being said, we can look at this image and see the whole image represented in these graphs. And already I can point out here that obviously there's a lot of light areas that we're not using and we don't stretch all the way down into the dark areas either. And that is because this clip is shot in S-Log, which is a very flat color profile. And you want to shoot it flat like that so that you can get a good you can kind of start at a very base flat level, and you can build onto the image from there and get it to look exactly how you want it to look. And so where it's so flat, we can then add in the contrast and add in the color later on. So it actually gives us a lot more room to play with and get creative with our shots. So the first thing we're going to do is probably stretch each value back up into these highlights that aren't being utilized. Stretch the darks down so that we're utilizing the whole range of value. We can do that with the master. Over here in the RGB curves, we have red represented, green, and blue all represented individually, and then the master is actually all three put together. So the first thing that we're going to do on these graphs, the highlights are represented in the top right as it goes up. The shadows and darks are represented in the bottom down here. So we are going to click and drag to get those highlights back up. And then we will, as you can see, it brought the shadows up, so we need to stretch those back down as well so that they reach all the way down to the bottom. We don't want them to pancake. As you can see right here, we used to have, like we can see right here in the blue, we used to have a nice round curve, but the green, because it bottomed out, it starts to pancake. We don't want it to pancake. We want it to get just to the point of before pancaking, and for some reason I can't get that just right. That's I'm going to back up just a little bit. Probably about right there, yeah. So that's, I mean, we're not pancaking at all anymore. Our image is kind of plateauing a little bit, so I'll call it pancaking when it's bottoming out and flattening out at the bottom. I call it plateauing, just kind of like you would see with a mountain plateau when it goes up and it just goes flat all of a sudden. We want to try and avoid that. So as you can see, it made the adjustments to the image itself. Already we can see that the highlights for the reds are here, and the greens are pretty close behind. We can stretch those up a little bit to match the reds a little bit, but then the blues are much lower. So we need to bring the blues up to match the red and the green. So we'll do that first. We'll just bring it up until it's pretty darn close, and now we can see all three of those are pretty close. Green could come up a little bit as well. There we go. So now all of those are the same across. And that's all I'm doing when looking at the scopes. I'm just looking for where the graphs themselves are similar to each other, and then trying to match up those. I'm just picking points of interest that kind of stand out to me, and then trying to match those up with each other. For instance, here's another pretty well-defined area of the graph. This little blob on the side. The red and green are pretty close, but the blue, it looks like, is a little bit higher. So if this is our highlights and this is our darks, this is going to be our mid-tones, and we're going to be using that, which represents like the kind of middle of the graph. So the blue area, we need to drop it down a little bit so it matches with the red and green mid-tones. So I'll just grab right here in the middle of the blue, I'll drop it down a bit, and now you can see those are pretty well even. The darks here, it looks like the green's definitely the lowest. The blues here can come down a little bit to match the greens. Same with the reds. So we'll drop the reds down first, and that's pretty close. And then the blues, we'll drop it down next, and there we go. All three of those are pretty close. I think I pancaked a little bit on the blue over here. So let's actually bring that back up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, we want to avoid pancaking. So now these three look pretty darn close to each other. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll leave it as that. And now that we have the image pretty well balanced with the initial balancing, we can close down the RGB curves and then go on to the next step, which is adding in our creative style or our creative look. So once it's all balanced, actually, sorry, I'm going to come back. The blue right there just looks a little bit lower, and you can even look here in the image and see it's almost got like a green tint to it. You'll train your eye. The more that you play with this, you'll train your eye to recognize these things. I'm going to bring the blue up just a tad, which it's not wanting to, which is really weird. Let me back up. Hold on. Why is that dropping? Oh, because that's, okay, sorry. So as you can see over here, by me adjusting this, it's actually curving the darks as well, so that's why it's not doing what I'm wanting it to. So if I double click, that's not one to work. Okay, anyway, so let's drive, there we go, right there. There we go. Now they're pretty well matched up. All right. So we'll close down RGB curves because we're not going to be going back to that now. I mean, we've done the initial balancing. It looks good. Our image right here looks balanced. Everything looks natural. Once you have it all natural and the white balance correctly, now we're going to add in our look. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring in one that I've downloaded. Now, Adobe has a bunch of looks here already, and let me just show you one of theirs. If we go in, so sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. In basic correction, there is this import LUT. If we use this one, we cannot adjust the intensity of the LUT being applied to the image. So I do not use the basic correction section. I use the one in creative, which is look here, and then you go and select your LUT here. I do that because, again, you can adjust the intensity here. So we'll bring that back to its original value. We'll go and this is one that I really like that Adobe has included. All of these LUTs here in the beginning basically mimic film that you used to be able to buy. So I'll click this one, and already, I mean, that's a pretty good looking shot, a pretty good looking creative style. This totally depends on what looks good to you at this point. Once you've got it balanced, after that, and you're adding the creativity part of it, it's all depending on what looks good to you. And every person's going to have their own style, and that is what you are defining right here. Is you actually develop your own style and what looks good to you and what you enjoy. That's kind of how people identify you and separate you from other filmmakers. So that's one thing you could do right there. Cinespace is kind of like a high contrast one. Doesn't really work with what I'm going for here. I just want like a nice. I want to bring in some more color. I want to. All these film looks are very flat. I want to bring in some more color, make some color pop, while still maintaining kind of that natural look. So I don't like any of these personally. I'm going to pause right here and go download one that I do like, and then I'll be right back. The difference it makes. I'm going to go with the Kodak Elite Color. I'll just go with this first one. So boom, that one's going to be really flat because, again, these are going to be mimicking some different films that you used to be able to buy. This one's a color implosion. It means it's reducing color. Again, I said that I was trying to go for one that introduces a lot of color. So some of them are kind of flat, and then you can go from there and add the color back into it. I have these other ones, which are famous movies. And you can see we got a few here. We got like Bob Ford and Apocalypse, and I think anyway. Throw one of these on there, you can see it again. It just kind of gives it a creative look, and that's all these LUTs do. Each one just kind of gives you a different result. So I know there's some that I really like. Like here's if I go back to my back in my folder over here, I have Peter McKinnon's Cinepack 1. He's got some in here that are really nice. The clean and tidy usually is pretty good. Keeps it still looking natural after you've balanced it, and introduces some color. He's got another one that's kind of more of a hipster. Adds some kind of teal and some orange. I guess that's kind of a thing right now. I don't really care for it much. Kodak Killer, he's got one that kind of mimics a Kodak camera, and this one's probably pretty darn close to what I'm going for. Again, it just adds a little color to it before. This is the before, this is the after. Adds a little bit of color to it. From here, we can kind of add some more by increasing our vibrance and our saturation. If we want to go even further, we can increase the intensity of the LUT. We can decrease the intensity of the LUT. That's kind of blowing out the skin tones for me. So I kind of like right there is probably pretty darn close to what I'm trying to go for. Still natural, but introduces the color back into it. So the next thing we can do, and so since we've made the adjustments over here with the Lumetri color, if we go back over here to the effect controls of the clip, you can see the list here is being created. We have our RGB curves that we use to balance the image originally. And then since we started making adjustments to Lumetri color over here, it's added that to the list. And again, it applies these edits from top to bottom. So if I actually move the Lumetri on top of the RGB, you can see the image is then changed because it is applying the Lumetri color adjustments first, and then it's applying the RGB. But we want to do the RGB first because that's how we balance the image, and then we're using the LUTs to kind of give a creative style or look to the image. Next thing I want to show you how to do is how to copy and paste this to other clips that you have, so it kind of saves you a little bit of time. Same thing with the order. Order matters when you're copying and pasting, so you want to click the first one first, then Control or Shift and click the next one. We'll go copy it, Control Copy, Control C or Command C. We'll go to our next clip here and we'll go Command Paste, and boom, there you go. It is applied to that clip now, so we have some good color on both clips. That is the basics of coloring, and I feel like this is long enough at this point that it can be even its own part as well. So that's coloring. If you want to, please use this, explore. Try to use the Lumetri scopes yourself. I promise you, if you start utilizing this and figuring this out, your videos will definitely be improved for it. The next challenge comes with trying to take clips that were shot on different cameras and trying to put them on one video and adjusting the color to make them look like they were shot with all one camera. That becomes a whole nother challenge, and I wish you the best in trying to get those clips looking the same. This is the basics, and this is how you will achieve that, but it's going to come from practice and you figuring out yourself. I'll probably do another video later on how to do that, but I did want to just kind of give you an introduction to coloring, and I promise you, if you use this will definitely make your videos look better, and people will recognize that. So all right, this is Parker Gurney signing off, and the next part we'll go into will be graphics, transitions, and how to export your videos.